Shalom, everybody. How are you doing today? Welcome to our weekly, well, it's only been one other time, but welcome to our weekly Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers meeting. Here in Efrat, here in Israel, it's already at night. It's 8:30 in the evening, probably on the east coast of the United States. It's 1:30 in the afternoon. I have lit a candle here because here in Israel, Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day for Israeli fallen soldiers and also for victims of terror has already begun. About a half hour ago, my wife and I stood outside on our porch, on our mirpeset, and we heard a siren, a very, very loud siren, during which time some people stop what they're doing, step outside. Didn't see too many people stepping outside tonight. It's cold, very, very cold here. And so we pay tribute and honor and thank, through memory, all of the soldiers who fell in defense of this beautiful and wonderful country. There is about 24,000 since 1948. There are also many, many, unfortunately, terror victims that we remember today as well. We remember tonight. So that's why I have this candle. I may move it over a little bit in a moment, but I just wanted all of us to know that we, here in Israel, we're already in this very solemn, I would have very solemn and sad period, remembering all of our brave men and women who died in battle in defense of our great country. So we pray that God remember them. We pray that God give them their due reward now and in the world to come. And we also pray for the comfort of the families who, because of the virus, are not able to go and visit the graves tomorrow because all of the cemeteries are closed. So imagine it's another burden, another very difficult and painful, heavy emotional burden on the families who can't even go and visit the graves. So we're thinking about all of them tonight, by you today, in the afternoon perhaps, and may their memory always be for a blessing, and may we always be reminded of the cost and the price that we have to pay for freedom and to have this country graced by God, given by God, and we should always have many, many more blessings and no deaths to be able to defend this great country. So, having said that, let me move this over for now so that I can look at my notes, which I think would be a great idea. Tonight we're going to be about another 30 minutes. I see the last couple of times here and with another session that I do, it's been a little bit over. So you're saying, hey, why don't you stop talking and let's start studying. And I think that's a great idea. So we're continuing now in the very first Mishnah, the very first teaching of Pirkei Avot. Just as a reminder, these are teachings by the greatest of our sages in the Jewish tradition. These are lessons handed down by God to Moses at Mount Sinai, continuing through Joshua to the elders, to the prophets, to the men of the great assembly, and all the way down to us. So we receive these teachings, and every time we study them, we receive them anew. We hear different things about these teachings. We maybe catch a different perspective, and I hope that's what I can provide for all of us tonight. Men of the Great Assembly, they ruled from about 520 before the Common Era to about the year 200 before the Common Era. These gentlemen, called in Hebrew the Anshei Knesset Hagadola, their imprint remains all this time on our rituals and customs. Maybe at another time we'll talk about the men of the Great Assembly. So here's their teaching that we're going to concentrate on tonight. And it says that the men of the Great Assembly taught the following three things. So they did not teach only three things. They were in charge and power, religious power, for 320 years. Imagine in 320 years to promulgate three things. Wow, in my sleep I promulgate 100 things. So here's what they said, and of course I'll read in Hebrew, then I'll translate it. Havu mitunim bedin. Be deliberate in judgment. V'hamidu talmidim harbe. And raise up or have many disciples. I used to have somebody in my previous synagogue who came from the former Soviet Union, and whenever she read the word disciple, she read them disciples. So I share that with you. Raise up and have many disciples. And the third teaching is Ve'asu siyag la Torah, which means make a fence, a boundary, a safeguard for the Torah. So let's take a look at each one of those individually and see what did the men of the Great Assembly want to teach us by these three lessons. So let's take a look at the first one. Havu bedin. Be deliberate in your judgment. What does that mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot different than what we would imagine it would mean. Be deliberate in judgment means that if you're a judge, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you've got to adjudicate anything, and you know that if you're a parent, grandparent, fights between children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever it is, and you call the shots. You have to listen to both sides. Who's sincere? Who might be fibbing? So, havu metunim bedin, be deliberate in judgment. Know what you need to know. Before you judge anything, you have to know all the sides, know what you need to know. You have to get all the facts and get them all straight. Make sure you know what you're talking about. And I guess it's a Yiddish word, but maybe not, no thumping. Maybe that's wider than just Yiddish. No thumping, or some people say no gefumping. What it means is don't mumble, don't garble. If you have something to say it clearly. Say it in a way that everybody will understand it. Be deliberate in judgment means know what you're talking about, get all the facts, do your homework, and in that way, you will be deliberate in judgment. You will look confident and sound confident. Here's another shade of meaning of be deliberate in judgment. Don't say too much. I'm going to guess that anybody watching probably has their own example of that. Don't say too much. Sometimes if you're asked a question and you're kind of like on a hot seat or whatever, and you want to say so much and you want to continue talking, just say what is the response to the question. Don't say a whole lot more. Don't blabber, don't gab. Just say whatever needs to be said and then move along. So that's kind of the two shades of meaning of be deliberate in judgment. Know the facts, get everything straight, make sure you're confident in what you're going to say, and also don't say too much. Don't talk too much. Today we call it TMI, too much information. We kind of reserve that for like more intimate kinds of things that only you should know about, nobody else needs to know about. But it's the same idea. Don't just say what you need to say. And the more you talk, the more you kind of unravel and you don't look so confident anymore. So that's their very first teaching. Havu mitunim bedin, be deliberate in judgment. Know what to say, get your facts straight. Don't say too much. Have I already said too much? Maybe I've just said too much now. Here's their second teaching. Ve'emidu talmidim harbe. What does that mean? That means you should raise many disciples. You should raise many disciples. Why should you do that? So that your values can be disseminated. Your values, your morals, whatever it is that you're teaching can be disseminated from person to person, era to era, generation to generation, and so on. It's a very interesting kind of a thing that there's an interest, certainly within Judaism, and I'm sure in all other religions as well. There's an interest in teachers teaching and having students who are their disciples. How do we know? Because the very opening to this teaching says Moses received the Torah from and he gave it to Joshua, and Joshua gave it to the elders, and they gave it to and they gave it to the men of the Great Assembly. There's a chain of transmission. And I think in every religion, that's a very important function, to transmit, pass along. In Hebrew, we would call it ledor vador, from generation to generation. So this teaching is telling us that if you are a teacher, raise many disciples so that your values can be disseminated. God forbid your values shouldn't be dying with you, that you kept it all to yourself. No, spread it. You want to share it. You want other people to know it and then to pass it on to the next generation as well. Teach them well. By the way, this is one of the main details of and famous paragraph in our Jewish tradition called the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the Lord is one. Then there's a paragraph of 5 verses found in Deuteronomy 6. I think it's 6 through 11, 5 through 11, something like that. And what does it say? Vishinantam levanecha. You shall teach these lessons to your children. That's a very clear commandment about creating disciples, passing it along from generation to generation. But it doesn't just mean have many students. It doesn't just mean, let's see, oh wow, I've got 500 students, let's see if I can get 600. It's very, very hard to have that many students and have a direct impact on all of them. So it's saying have many students, but don't overdo it. Don't have too many students, because then your personal impact is not going to be that great on any one of them. But it's even saying more. It's saying that you should make sure that these students that you're going to send out, or these children that you're going to send out into the world, make sure that they are confident and make sure that they are able to stand on their own when they're out in the world. And we get that shade of meaning of this lesson from the word in Hebrew, vehemidu. Laha'amid means to stand something straight and firm. Stand something confident that's not going to easily topple over. You may remember last week in my first Facebook Live, I had my phone kind of balanced on something, and then in the middle of it, the whole thing fell. So that's not he'emidu. He'emidu is what I have right now. My phone is in like a receptacle that holds coasters. It holds coasters. So I took a few of the coasters, put them in the back of the phone. It's now resting in a little cradle. And this is already TMI. Do you really need to know this? And the answer is no. No, you don't. But this is the idea of Amidu. Make sure that whoever you send out into the world, a parent, a teacher, whoever, make sure that those people that you send out into the world are confident, they're strong, they can stand on their own, they're deliberate, etc. So if you were to say to me, give me an example of somebody who did that, I would say to you, I have no problem with saying the words the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe was the head of the Lubavitch Hasidim that all originated in the Russian town of, that's right, Discipolis, the Russian town of Lubavitch. Their Rebbe, I think, was the Rebbe over, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, of Lubavitch Chabad Hasidim. He had many, many students. I don't know to what degrees, I'm not intimate enough with what went on in Chabad. I don't know to what degree he had a direct teaching influence on individuals and their wives who were going to go out into different parts of the world as emissaries of Chabad. I don't know if he was able to spend a whole lot of time personally with everybody. I don't know. Could be that he did. But he had thousands. At any one point while he was alive, he passed away about 25 years ago or so. At any one point, my gosh, he had, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 emissaries in different parts of the globe. Now, did he spend years and years with each one separately? Hard to imagine, but again, I really don't know. Here's what I do know, that each and every one of his emissaries, and if they were married, and their wives, before they would be sent out into wherever, East Yohopitz, or big towns, small towns, hard to say, before he would send them out, I'm sure he met with them. I'm sure he'd have made a personal connection so that if they had any questions while they were out in the field, they would know who to contact, or the secretary of the Rebbe. But here's the amazing thing. There were so many opportunities for any student and their wives to hear the Rebbe's teachings. He gave something called a Farbringen, which means in Yiddish, I think, to bring people together. Thousands of people would listen in Brooklyn, 770 Eastern Parkway, Crown Heights in New York, and thousands more would listen by satellite or earpieces, transistors, transmissions of all different kinds. So whatever they didn't get with the Rebbe personally for a long period of time, they had ample opportunities to hear his teachings, his passion. The Rebbe had passion when he spoke. Sometimes a Farbrengen could take hours, and people stayed and they loved it. So this is kind of my image of somebody who made sure that all of his people, the ones he was going to send out into the world, all of his people were not only educated, but they were solid, they were confident, they knew what they needed to know, and he stood them up, he'emidu. He stood them up and made sure that they were able to do whatever they needed to do in a confident, firm, and upstanding, literally, kind of a way. So this is a very strong teaching. I know for myself, for example, I have students. I teach high school girls. I teach adults. I teach retirees. I don't know. I only hope that if I were to teach them over a longer period of time, I would definitely spend a lot more time with them, especially if they were looking to me as their mentor. Sometimes I'm their tormentor, but if they were looking to me as a mentor, I would definitely spend, oodles of time with them before they went out into the world. But this is what the Rebbe did. And by the way, this is what many, many great rabbis have done and continue to do. They know that their students are going to go out into the world as respected, admirable rabbis who will be called upon to do all kinds of things, give lectures and lessons and do all kinds of life cycle events. They make sure that their students don't go out half-wilted. They don't go out wondering, what am I supposed to do at a wedding? Well, if you had good training, you better believe your rabbi is going to make sure you know how to do a wedding. So that is the second part of this teaching. The first part, again, was be deliberate in judgment, know what to say, how to say, be clear, don't say too much. And this part of the teaching was raise many disciples and make sure that before you let them go out into the world, make sure that they have confidence, they're firm in what they need to do, and make sure that they know their job, etc. The third part of this teaching is very interesting to me, and hopefully it will be interesting to you. It says here, V'asu siag laTorah, make a fence around the Torah. We have to protect the Torah, and we have to guard it. So if you've heard this for the first time, you may say, what does that mean? Put a fence around the Torah? Okay, let's find a park and put a Torah scroll in the middle of the park, and let's make a fence around it, and I guess we have fulfilled this teaching. Put a fence around the Torah. It's not what it means. It means to say that the Torah, as a scroll, as a container of divine lessons and morals and history and other things, laws, that Torah needs to be protected. The laws need to be protected. So I'll give you an example, and then I'll give you some practical applications. One very clear example, if you have ever been in a synagogue, you will know that besides the people in the synagogue, the most protected, the most honored thing, if you will, in that synagogue is the Torah scroll. That's the peak of importance in that building is the Torah scroll. The Torah for the Jewish people is what is our battery. This is our oxygen. Now, you would imagine, if you've never been in a synagogue, okay, I was invited to a synagogue, I'm going to step in the lobby, and the first thing I expect to see is the Torah scroll, because that's the most valued, the most important, the most revered, and the most honored thing in the entire synagogue. It's going to be right there in the lobby. And you know something? You'd be wrong, because it's not in the lobby. It's nowhere near the lobby. You've got to walk. I don't know if it's a big synagogue, small synagogue, whatever. You have to walk towards what they call the main sanctuary, where they have the seats, all the pews. And then you'll see in front of the sanctuary an ark made out of whatever. In this ark is the Torah scroll, but it's not so easy to get to the Torah scroll. because you approach the ark, and the ark usually has curtains. So you have to pull a string and pull apart the curtains. Behind the curtains is usually doors, like wooden doors, metal doors, whatever. Now you open the doors, and then you will see one or several Torah scrolls. Have you seen the actual Torah yet? No, because the Torah scroll is covered. It's covered with crowns, beautiful crowns with bells. You have to take those off. And then every Torah scroll probably has a breastplate, beautiful silver breastplate. You have to take that off. Every Torah scroll has a cover. You have to take that off. So now you see the parchment and the wood of the Torah scroll, but you can't really look inside it yet because every Torah scroll has a belt around it to keep the two parts of the scroll together. So now you take off the belt and boom, now you've seen the Torah. But I mention this because this is an example of how we keep, one way, how we keep the Torah protected and guarded. It's not out there in the lobby for everybody to see, and touch and play with, God forbid. It is in a very sacred and solemn location, hidden from the naked eye, until we need to use it. Then we open up the ark, open up the Torah, and there we have the Torah. So that's kind of like one example of Asu Siag LaTorah. Make a fence for the Torah, surround it, protect it, and guard it. That it's not used or seen as anything mundane. Okay? Here are some regulations. As an example, a couple of examples of regulations that protect the laws of the Torah, which I think is more what this lesson is. We have to protect the laws of the Torah. So here's a couple of examples. Example number 1. We are taught in the Torah that we may not have meat and milk together. You shall not seethe, love that word, you shall not seethe a kid in its mother's milk. Okay, what does that mean? So our rabbis determined that that means you don't eat them together, you don't cook them together, and you don't benefit from them being together. It says that phrase, do not seethe a kid in its mother's milk, 3 times in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, to tell us that there are 3 separate prohibitions. So we know that we're not allowed to eat meat and milk together. Okay, so you would say, well, let's say you just had a good ribeye, which is what people used to call me when I was the ribeye of the congregation. They used to say, hey, well, of course I had a big stake in that. But they used to call me ribeye, and of course rabbi. So when I was in the congregation, somebody would say to me, you know, if you're not supposed to eat them together, benefit from them together, cook them together, let's have a nice ribeye steak, finish it, wipe your mouth, and right away have something dairy. Now, that sounds logical, sounds sensible. I'm not eating them together. What did our rabbis teach us? That from the time that we eat meat until the time that we eat milk, we need to have a certain separation by either 1 hour, according to some traditions, 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever. Whatever it is, there needs to be a time of separation between the meat and the milk. Why? So that we don't even come close to eating them together. And that's one example of make a fence around the Torah. We do something that distances ourselves from the prohibition. A little time period, whatever it is. Okay? Here's another example. On Shabbat, in a Jewish household, we do not light fires. We do not light flames. We don't put lights on and off. And so, what do? We do certain things to make sure there's light in the house. But usually the woman of the house will light Shabbat candles right before Shabbat. And then we know that from that point on, we're not allowed to light anything, put anything on fire, turn on a flame. Everything is pre-cooked, etc. So one would say, okay, I don't want to violate the laws of Shabbat. Let's say Shabbat, this week here in Efrat, Shabbat came in at 6:56, 4 minutes to 7. That's when Shabbat officially came in. But sunset was probably about 18 minutes later. So let's call it 7:15. So if I know by the time 7:15 rolls around, I may not light any flames or fires, at 7:15 I can no longer light the Shabbat candles, you know when I'm going to do it? 7:14. Why not? It's logical, reasonable. I haven't lit the fires on Shabbat. At 7:14, okay, I'll be a nice guy. 7:13. 7:13, I'm going to light the Shabbat candles. And the rabbi said, not a good idea. We need to give you a lot more time before the actual onset of Shabbat, because if you're going to get that close to 7:14, 7:13, chances are you're going to miss it. And what will you end up doing? You're going to be lighting the candles on Shabbat, and we're not allowed to light flames or pass flames on Shabbat. So what did the rabbis say? They came up with this idea: light the Shabbat candles 18 minutes before you're prohibited from lighting the candles. That's just another example of make a fence around the Torah, protect the laws of the Torah. Just like we wait a certain amount of time between meat and milk, we also wait a certain amount of time before the actual time of the prohibition. So I'll bring in the virus, and then very shortly we have to end, because I promised this is a 30-minute lesson. If you take a look at this virus that we're living through now, hope everybody's well and healthy, God willing. With this virus, there are so many regulations. It started with distancing, 6 feet, whatever it is in your place, distancing. And then we went to a mask. And then we went to gloves. And then we went to all kinds of things that keep us, God willing, safe and healthy. At the same time, though, what if we removed one or two of those things right now? What if we didn't keep to every one of those 24 regulations? What would happen? What would happen is, well, at least we kept X amount of those regulations, and that will have to be good enough. What I'm saying is that in the same way these regulations protect us, and one might say it's overly regulated, and one might be right. But the idea of over-regulation is to keep you safe, so that if you don't keep one or two of them, you're still okay. And I think that's the same idea with this teaching from the Mishnah, that if you are able to do things that separate you from a prohibition, then you have made a fence for the Torah. So this is the third teaching. One would ask before we end, how do these three lessons fit together? And usually they do. When the sages say these three lessons, they usually have some kind of a connection. So what is the connection between these three lessons? And then we will finish. For lesson number 1, be clear about judgment. We spoke a lot about that. Lesson number 2, raise disciples who are clear and confident in what they're going to be doing. And number 3, these disciples, they have a top priority as Jewish leaders. Men, women, whoever it is, the disciples have a top priority, and their top priority is not only to study, it's not only to teach, but it's also to protect the Torah. Because people will whittle away at the laws. They will say, God doesn't care about this part of the Torah. This part of the Torah doesn't make sense. This was only for 2,000 years ago. It doesn't apply to today. There's no modernity in this Torah. People are going to whittle away at this Torah. So you, as a disciple who is confident, clear, you have to make sure that your top priority is to protect this Torah from being whittled away, being chopped at and chipped at, because that is what people will do if they don't understand the divine messages of the Torah. So, dear friends, this is where we end. Yom HaZikaron, tonight, tomorrow, Israel's Memorial Day for fallen soldiers and victims of terror. Tuesday night, Wednesday, Yom HaAtzmaut, 72nd anniversary of Israel's independence. We'll be celebrating that here in Israel with a lot of, well, not so much pomp or ceremony because of the virus, but in homes, neighborhoods, we're going to be whooping it up, thanking God for this great miracle of the state of Israel. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful night or a day. And God willing, you'll be with us next time. Wednesday night, 8:30, 1:30, 8:30 here in Israel, 1:30. 5 Derech Eretz lessons from the weekly Torah portion. Thanks again. Be well and have a great day. Bye-bye now.